The monitor is flat. The doctors have stopped counting. To everyone in that room, you have already left it. But somewhere in the dark behind your eyes, a question science is only now daring to ask. Were you still listening? For most of modern medicine, death was a switch. The heart stops. Oxygen to the brain runs out in seconds. And on the EEG, the brain's electrical signature goes flat, silent, within 10 to 20 seconds. A flat line wasn't a dimming. It was read as the total shutdown of the mind. No blood, no signal, no experience. If a body couldn't move, or blink, or answer, we concluded there was no one left inside to hear. So when survivors came back saying they'd heard the room, the words, the panic, the tools, we had a name for it: confabulation, a false memory, a trick of a suffocating brain. We were so sure, and then the data started to disagree. There's a sentence passed down in hospices for generations, long before anyone could prove it. Nurses say it to families in the final hours. Hearing is the last sense to go. For a long time, that was folklore, comfort, not science. But look at how the brain is built, and folklore starts to sound like anatomy. Vision is expensive. It burns enormous energy. The retina, the optic nerve, whole regions of cortex, and it needs a body that still works. Eyelids that open, eyes that move. In dying, that machinery fails almost immediately. Hearing is the opposite. It's older. It's buried deep in the brainstem, in structures that survive on far less oxygen. And it's passive, a 360-degree monitor that never closes. Sound physically vibrates the eardrum and travels inward on its own, whether you're awake or not. Which raises a aphorism never could. If the pathway for hearing can outlast the parts of the brain that make us aware, then who, exactly, is the sound reaching? In 2001, in the Netherlands, researchers did something the old certainty said was pointless. They interviewed 344 people who had survived cardiac arrest, days after, before memory could be rebuilt. The study ran in The Lancet. 18% came back with structured memories of the time they were clinically dead, and a handful did something that should have been impossible. They described their own resuscitation, specific words between doctors and nurses, the sound of the instruments, details later verified from minutes when every monitor said they were gone. Not a feeling, not a light, a sentence, recorded by a brain that on paper had already stopped. One case is an anomaly you can dismiss, but this wasn't one case. And the question it left behind only got sharper. Could you hear the room while the room was giving up on you? So a team led by Dr. Sam Parnia decided to stop waiting for accidents and set a trap for the dying brain. In the largest study of its kind, AWARE 2, published in 2023, patients in cardiac arrest had headphones placed in their ears during CPR. On a loop, 3 words: apple, pear, banana. Above them, a tablet showed images, facing up, toward eyes that couldn't see. They were, by every clinical measure, dead. Cerebral oxygen crashed to a mean of 43%, a level the body isn't supposed to survive. And yet, on the EEG, normal brain rhythms kept flickering back. Not for seconds, but up to 35, even 60 minutes into CPR. Of the survivors interviewed, not one could name the image on the tablet. Vision stayed dark, but one of them, came back and correctly named the 3 fruits. Words played into the ears of a person whose heart was not beating. Hearing, it seemed, had reached someone. And that single voice from the other side of the flat line is either the most important recording in the science of death or nothing at all. Because the skeptics were waiting. Here's where honest science turns on itself, and I won't hide it from you. One patient named 3 fruits. But when researchers asked 50 healthy students to simply guess 3 fruits at random, 2 of them said apple, pear, banana. No headphones, no death, pure chance. So was that survivor remembering or guessing. And there's more. Those dramatic surges of brain activity in the dying, critics point out they often sit in a frequency range and a place on the skull that is the classic fingerprint of something far less romantic, the muscles of the face and jaw twitching as the body dies. Not a mind reviewing a life, maybe just a clenching jaw. Their bottom line is brutal and simple. No functioning brain, no mind. Read a flicker as a memory, and you're seeing a ghost in the noise. It's a devastating case, and it would close the book if the brain at the edge of death behaved the way we always assumed. It doesn't. Follow the biology down to the cell, and a flat EEG stops meaning what we thought. The work of Dr. Jens Dreyer showed that when oxygen drops past a critical point, the brain goes electrically silent on the surface, but the neurons themselves are still intact, still charged, still alive. The true, irreversible death, a toxic wave that collapses the cells, comes minutes later. Which means there is a window, a stretch of time where the monitor reads flat, the room calls it over, and underneath, the tissue is quiet but not gone. Still, in principle, capable of catching a sound. We had been reading silence as absence. What if, for a few minutes, silence was just waiting? Because in that window, the dying brain does the last thing anyone predicted. In 2013, at the University of Michigan, researchers watched the brains of animals in the instant the heart stopped. They expected the signal to fade. Instead, within 30 seconds, it surged, a burst of gamma waves, the signature of focus, of vivid memory, more organized than a fully waking brain. Then they found it in humans. In 2023, that same surge concentrated in a region at the back of the brain that fuses our senses together, including sound. And once, by pure accident, we caught it live. An 87-year-old man wired for a routine brain scan went into cardiac arrest mid-recording. For the first time, a human being's final seconds were captured, and the dying brain lit up, pulsing with the exact rhythms tied to memory and dreaming. Is that an experience, or the fireworks of a machine tearing itself apart? Honestly, we don't yet know, but it tells us the dying brain is not an empty room. And that changes what a voice in that room might do. And here is the strangest part, the part that explains the survivors who came back describing two things at once. As the brain loses oxygen, it doesn't shut down evenly. The front of the brain, the part that checks reality, that filters and explains, fails first. The editor goes offline. What's left is the raw sensory machinery, and hearing still running. So a real sound from the room, a doctor's voice, an alarm, a family member crying, enters a brain with no one left to sort it. It isn't filtered. It gets woven, raw, straight into whatever the dying mind is generating. That's why some survivors report the exact words spoken over their body, fused seamlessly into something vast, peaceful, unreal. The clinical and the mystical in the same breath. Because to that brain, they arrived as the same signal. If this is real, even sometimes, it stops being a curiosity and becomes one of the heaviest questions in medicine. During CPR, some patients now wake mid-compression, eyes open, fighting, feeling it. It's real enough that emergency teams around the world have rewritten their protocols to sedate patients whose hearts have stopped. I've stood at the flat line. I've heard the room change the second a monitor goes quiet. The voices drop their guard. The language turns cold. The person in the bed becomes a case. Science can't yet tell us, for certain, whether anyone is still listening in those minutes. But it can no longer tell us that no one is. And that uncertainty asks something of us. The old nurses never needed a study. They leaned close, and they spoke gently, and they said, "We're here. You can let go." Maybe they understood, before the machines did, that the last thing a dying person may ever do is hear us. So before you go, I want to hear from you. If you knew that someone could still hear you in their final minutes, what are the words you'd want them to hear? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if this changed how you'll listen at a bedside, do one thing. Like it, share it with someone who should hear it, and subscribe. We're only just beginning to explore the edge of what science can't explain.